We now invite His Excellency Matthias Cormann, Secretary-General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this session. At the OECD, we're very proud to be supporting Ukraine strongly in advancing its ambitious reform priorities. We are halfway through a 4-year OECD Ukraine country program, which we launched in 2023 and which forms part of an initial accession dialogue for Ukraine to the OECD. Ukraine's unwavering commitment to pursue important reforms and the successful reform outcomes Ukraine has been able to achieve so far in the most challenging of circumstances are incredibly impressive and inspiring. There is no doubt in my mind that once a just and lasting peace has been secured, Ukraine's hard work on reforms right now will provide a strong foundation for a strong recovery, for strong growth, and for increased prosperity and living standards for the people of Ukraine. Ukraine has done a lot of work to materially improve public sector and business integrity. This will help boost trust and future investment. Indeed, Ukraine has succeeded to materially decrease public experience of everyday corruption. A credible survey conducted on 8 occasions across Ukraine since 2007 shows that the share of citizens reporting experiences with corruption has dropped sharply from 70% in 2015 to just 15% in 2024, an outcome which can be directly attributed to the government's efforts. Indeed, assessed against the OECD's public integrity indicators, Ukraine has built a robust legal and institutional framework to tackle corruption risk and boost integrity. In fact, the quality of Ukraine's legal and institutional integrity arrangements is now above the OECD average in several key areas. Indeed, Ukraine's national anti-corruption strategy fulfills 73% of OECD criteria on the quality of its strategic framework and 80% of criteria on implementation, well above the OECD averages of 43% and 36% respectively. We have recently finalized and publicly released our Integrity and Anti-Corruption Review of Ukraine, which provides recommendations for further progress. By strengthening the government's audit and control systems, by swiftly implementing the new lobbying framework in a way which is consistent with OECD best practices, and by continuing the judicial reform momentum, including by implementing the new ethics code and whistleblower protections. More broadly, we are working with Ukraine on reforms to unlock greater competition, dynamism and productivity in the economy. The OECD's competition policy peer review, which we plan to launch in October, will help Ukraine align more closely with OECD standards on competition investigations and merger controls, as well as with the European Union's competition rules. And we have supported Ukraine in aligning with the OECD guidelines on corporate governance of state-owned enterprises. In November last year, Ukraine introduced a new state ownership policy boosting transparency in the supervision of state-owned enterprises, aligning their operations with market principles consistent with OECD guidelines. To improve public sector effectiveness, Ukraine is also moving ahead with further reforms on administrative decentralization and to strengthen municipal governance capacity. We're supporting Ukraine in implementing its decentralization reform roadmap, including by building capacity in local governments to design, fund, procure and monitor reconstruction and recovery projects. In support of Ukraine's macroeconomic policy framework, 2 months ago in Kiev, Prime Minister Shmyhal and I also launched our 2025 OECD Economic Survey of Ukraine. That survey highlights key policy priorities to help strengthen Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction, drawing on its full potential once the security situation improves. improving the business environment by easing regulatory burdens and enhancing the functioning of electricity markets, strengthening public finances by increasing spending efficiency and optimizing tax collection, and importantly, addressing labour shortages by increasing incentives for the return of displaced people and by boosting women's labour market participation. A high-quality education system will be key for Ukraine to unlock its full potential, and the OECD is working with the Ukraine Ministry of Education in order to support those efforts. Indeed, we are working with Ukraine's Ministry of Education to design, pilot and roll out a new online tutoring system, POVIA. To measure both student and adult skills, we are very happy that Ukraine will also be participating in our Teaching and Learning International Survey, as well as our 2026 PISA assessment. The OECD will continue to work very closely with the government of Ukraine to support its reform journey, and we will continue to support reforms that help Ukraine progress its future OECD and EU membership aspirations. Today, the OECD is signing a joint statement with Ukraine on strengthening competitiveness in Ukraine and economic convergence with OECD and the European Union to support progress towards those aspirations, including through an economic convergence scoreboard to measure Ukraine's progress and identify key priorities for further actions. Our work at the OECD is fully aligned with the priorities of the EU Recovery Facility for financial assistance to Ukraine, and we will continue to coordinate closely with the government of Ukraine and all our international partners, including and in particular through the Ukraine Donor Platform, to avoid duplication of effort and to leverage our respective strengths. We look forward to continuing our work together in support of the government of Ukraine in building a prosperous, free and European future for Ukraine. Thank you very much.
To conclude this session, please welcome His Excellency Hao Liang-shu, UN Under-Secretary General and Associate Administrator of UNDP, speaking also on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations, I thank the governments of Italy and the Ukraine for convening us today. From the outset, let me reiterate the UN's full commitment to the sovereignty, independence, and the national integrity of Ukraine. The gathering affirms our unwavering pledge to a future where peace defines the lives of the Ukrainian people. I visited Ukraine recently to discuss recovery efforts with senior officials and to meet people rebuilding their lives amid the war. That includes meeting Vera and her husband in Bolodianka, reconstructing their home after the land was cleared of unexploded ordnance with the UN support. Since the earliest days of the war, the UN has stood alongside the people of Ukraine. In 2024, over 20 UN agencies delivered coordinated humanitarian recovery and development support. Thanks to the strong donor support, nearly $2.5 billion was provided under the Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan, and over $685 million was invested in recovery and development. Some notable results include over 8.4 million people received life-saving humanitarian assistance, and 23 million people will have regained access to basic services through the recovery of the energy sector by the end of 2025. Looking ahead, the new UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework 2025-2029 will focus on investing in people, fostering inclusive economic growth, protecting the environment, and promoting peace, justice, and strong institutions. The UN will continue to support the government's recovery portfolios, everything from green energy to demining and economic revitalization, while convening stakeholders to co-design inclusive and sustainable solutions. We call on all partners to champion local leadership, mobilizing the private sector and unlocking concessional finance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, from energy to demining, from jobs to justice, the United Nations is committed to an inclusive recovery that reimagines Ukraine's future. Investing in reconstruction and recovery requires all of us to also invest in peace. The UN reiterates its call for a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire toward a just and lasting peace grounded in the UN Charter, international law, and the relevant resolutions. Thank you very much.
With this, we conclude the opening segment of the Recovery Forum. The voices we have heard representing national governments, European institutions, and the business community have laid the foundation for what this forum is designed to achieve: strengthening partnerships, advancing dialogue, and aligning efforts for Ukraine's recovery.
Excellencies, ministers, distinguished guests, we now move to the next part of the conference, the fourth plenary session on finance. This session will be moderated by His Excellency François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance of Canada, here in this plenary hall, who I kindly ask to join us on the stage. It is now our honor to invite on stage also the distinguished participants of this plenary session on finance, Honorable Serhiy Marchenko.
Yesterday with the private sector colleagues, 200 million that we will be disbursing today for the World Bank Ukrainian Financial Intermediary Fund. So the money's coming. I can say, you can call my good friend AJ, money's coming. I'm told it's being wired today. And we were talking also about, Sergey, how can we use that money in a very productive way. Colleagues, you will all understand by now, it's close to 4 o'clock now, that we have a moral imperative to rebuild Ukraine. But it's also a generational opportunity to build back better. And I think that's this distinguished panel the colleagues will bring to you. I can tell you that at the G7 level, Sergey was our guest of honor in Canada this year when we hosted the finance minister in Banff and the central bank governor. We had one guest, and it was the finance minister of Ukraine. If that's not a big message to the world or to Russia, I hope they're listening to what we're saying today. Because we were supporting you, all of us at the G7. And one of the things that we achieved at the G7 finance minister was a communique, which these days is an achievement in itself. Valdis would agree with me. And we put in that communique that no one who supported either directly or indirectly Russia in this war of aggression against Ukraine will benefit or should benefit from the reconstruction effort. And I think, and I heard General Kellogg repeating that today, I think this was a one of the main achievements of the G7, I would say, Sergey, thanks to your presence. And someone said very wisely yesterday that talking about reconstruction is an act of defiance in itself. It's sending a message to Russia that, we know we're going to win, and we're already prepared for the next phase and bringing hope to people. And I like what I heard this morning about people first. It's not about building, it's about the future. It's not just about infrastructure, it's about building community. It's not just about us trying to find opportunity, but it's to build ourselves a better future. And colleagues should remember in the private sector, this is going to be largely the largest reconstruction effort since the Second World War. Our friends at the International Monetary Fund have estimated that you're talking north of 500 billion over 10 years. So you can imagine the scope and scale of what we're talking about. I think it was right this morning when we talk about a Marshall Plan, because it's in that scale historically of what we are called to do. And the message I have for you all from the private sector, what we need to build is confidence and assurance. To have this Marshall Plan, we can, and I'm joined by the International Financial Institution, and as the chair of the G7 finance minister, our role is to create a condition for investments. Governments alone won't be able to do it. International financial institution alone won't be able to do it. But with the private sector, we can do it together. And I think that's the key message we want to bring to you today. And really from our perspective, is really about how can we restore business confidence or instill business confidence? How can we de-risk investments? And very wisely yesterday when I was with Sergey for dinner, we talked about how can we present bankable projects, because we need to start from the basis. What kind of bankable projects can we build together so that obviously we can have the private sector along with us? And we heard from the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, there is a lot of opportunities around housing, around energy, around food, transportation, defense. I mean, I would almost say the list is endless in how you can build back better. And I think history, if history is of any guidance, we have with technology today opportunities to really build a very inclusive society, one that every Ukrainian will be proud. And I would say one that every citizen of a democracy should be proud, because this is building Ukraine of the future. And, inspired by the word of the leaders, whether it's the Chancellor of Germany or President von der Leyen, one key aspect of that is Ukraine acceding to the European Union. This is a key piece of that effort, I would say, to bring investors, because then you get access to free movement of people and goods, and obviously Valdis can speak about that. So you really have the people in front of you who can really, with the private sector, oftentimes, and I'll finish there, people ask us, but how? How can we do it? How are we going to de-risk? How can we instill business confidence? What about insurance? What about the mechanism? And you have the brightest people next to me on my right and my left to really guide the private sector. And I'm happy that the Business Council is with us because they're the ones who are going to do it. And if there's one panel where you're going to learn something today, this is it. So this is a wise investment of your time today that you can carry back to your capital and say, those are the tools indeed in order to do that. With that, I'm told if technology is on our side, that we will have a message that has been recorded by our friend Scott Besson from Washington. So if technology is with us, you should look at the screen, and if everything works well, you should see the face and the voice of my friend Scott Besson from Washington. Scott, I would say the floor is yours.
Thank you to the government of Ukraine and the government of Italy for inviting me to participate virtually in the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Now more than ever, the public sector and the private sector must work together to establish strong foundations for Ukraine's recovery. Ukraine's reconstruction needs are immense, and its diplomatic partners and allies cannot meet these needs on their own. Private capital is necessary to complement public investment and drive long-term economic growth, including in Ukraine's burgeoning and innovative defense industry. Economic security supports national security. That's why President Trump spearheaded the establishment of the United States Reconstruction Investment Fund. With sound macroeconomic management and robust foreign investment, Ukraine's economic future will be far stronger than its past. The Reconstruction Investment Fund is key to unlocking that abundant future. This partnership will allow the United States to invest alongside Ukraine to facilitate its recovery. It will mobilize American talent, resources, and governance standards to improve Ukraine's investment climate. And it will work to ensure that no person, state, or company that financed or supplied the Russian war machine will be allowed to benefit from Ukraine's reconstruction. The international financial institutions, including the multilateral development banks, have an important role to play in a private sector-driven recovery. Throughout the conflict, these institutions have helped to advance structural reforms that strengthen Ukraine's anti-corruption institutions and improve its business climate. This work will be especially critical during the reconstruction period. I hope many of these institutions will partner with the Reconstruction Investment Fund as co-investors, and I hope they will support the commitment of G7 finance ministers to align capital and procurement standards with pro-Ukrainian values. I look forward to the international community's continued partnership on these efforts, as well as the opportunity for the United States to contribute directly to Ukraine's economic development and prosperity. The Reconstruction Investment Fund is the forerunner to a lasting peace. I firmly believe that through this economic partnership, we can make both our countries great again. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll say thank you, Secretary Besson, on behalf of everyone here. I'll convey your applause to him when I see him very soon, I guess. We have a G7 meeting coming just next week. Following that, and I think it's great to see our American friends so engaged, and I'll turn over to you, Sergey, first before, but it's great. We heard from General Kellogg, we heard from Chancellor of Germany, Secretary Besson, who was instrumental in our G7 meeting in Banff to really point out, and I think, let me repeat, because I think it really matters to the Business Council that no one who has supported the Russian effort in its unjustified and illegal war against Ukraine should benefit directly or indirectly from the reconstruction. And I think I said it before, but it's great to hear from Secretary Bessa, and I think from the G7, you hear it loud and clear to the international financial institution, but the world also took notice. Sergei, you are at the center of all that. You have been finance minister for a long time, I would say. You've been finance minister. You are our guest at about every G7 that I've attended, at least those that I've presided, but certainly those that I've attended as well. You have been instrumental also in the reform agenda to improve the business environment in Ukraine, not only what you have done, but what you're planning to do. I think it would be great if colleagues agree to start with you to set the stage a bit. What is the business environment? What are the steps you've been taking? There's a big reform agenda that you presided, and I would say I must commend you on behalf of every people in this room, because what you have achieved in terms of growth, what you have achieved in terms of reform, what you have achieved in terms of rebuilding industrial base in wartime is historic. I've rarely seen any leader, and I think you deserve a big round of applause for that, because you have done more than anyone I can think during a wartime to really set Ukraine to be able to fight this war, to win this war, but also to look at a brighter future. So with that, my dear friend Sergei, I'll turn over to you first, and then I'll go to our friend Valdis. Sergei?
Thank you, François-Philippe, for your kind words, and you create some kind of unnecessary expectation. You know, we ministries of finance are very cynical about our achievements, and our goals is far away from behind us, so we have next perspective, next budget year. We are thinking forward and proactively. Again, I think that resilience of Ukrainian people, our government, our president is proven fact that we are a country which are capable to reach any goals we wish to reach. And that's why I think that I'm part of this team of great people, and specifically people which are fighting in a battlefield. They are very determined to preserve independence, integrity of our country, and I think they really receive and should receive the applause which is necessary. This is the people who really matters and who we should care about. That's why, well, your question is quite, on one hand, it's very simple, because we live in a very simple world of figures. If we have capacity to provide some additional impulses for business environment of Ukraine, we can do it. Right now, we're in a more sober mind, so we try to have fiscal consolidation. We try to channel all of our existing resources to support our army. It's a rather huge amount. We spent 64% of our budget on support of our security and defense. It's a rather huge amount in dollar terms. It's more than $60 billion per year. And it's every year it's additional pressure on our budget needs. So just explaining that if you're talking about reconstruction priority, how to make it possible to additionally bring resources to reconstruction of Ukraine, we should think, and we discussed it with you yesterday, about possibility and possible ways how to attract private business, how to combine this expectation of private business to invest of Ukraine, existing resources, available resources. There are a lot of resources throughout the world. And now you have all necessary players here, all development banks are here. It's a chairman of this institution. This is really people which we in a constant contact every day, practically every day. They're helping us quite significantly. And we really admire this effort. And European Union, as well as Valdis Dombrovskis representing European Union, also been in constant contact with his team, trying to creatively engage, creative destruction in a way how to use and how to utilize, for example, frozen Russian assets. So we try as hard as we can.
But to be short in my messages, I think that we also try to establish from our side a very reliable and transparent structure. Starting from this year, we introduced public investment management structure. We introduced single project pipeline. It helped all of our institutions which help us to collaborate, to attract additional resources, to understand what is governmental priority, what specific project government are eager to support, and we in a constant contact trying to combine money available in our budget. It's rather scarce money for reconstruction and development, and money which is available in development banks. It's a rather significant amount if we think proactively, strategically, because we can combine and multiply existing amounts. And the good example is multipliers which we absorbed with World Bank previously. It's helped us multiply grants financing by 3 times, so it's also quite helpful to think strategically what we want to achieve using grant money. But the missing point is how to make possible for business to understand that projects of Ukraine are bankable, they are risk-free, and we need to think and create a structure which help us de-risk existing projects, make possible for business to participate, to step up and to invest in Ukraine, even during the war. Even during the war, not all targets can be destroyed. And I think that even if Russia destroyed some specific facility, we are capable to restore it.
Thank you for your feedback, Sergey. Yeah, big round of applause. Very well deserved. And one of the things we said in that, I'll turn to our good friend Valdis, but how could we facilitate? And I'm saying that because, like you said, we have the enablers. You and I are the ones who are in the action, but the enablers are really around us in terms of feasibility study and pre-feasibility studies. How can we use some of these funds to have a larger pipeline of bankable projects? You know, you already created this one unique stream where you can see the project. That's very helpful for people in the business sector, where you can find the list of projects. We were saying with Sergey yesterday, you know, how do you make some of these projects bankable? And oftentimes I'm saying that to our colleagues from the international financial institution is you have to start with the first thing, which is do you have a pre-feasibility study in order to be able to lead to a bankable projects that once you have one, you could even return that and have something evergreen, because then you can include the cost of the pre-feasibility and feasibility study into the project finance, and then you could have something evergreen. So that was one of the things with Sergey we discussed yesterday that we should be considering. Now, let me turn to a colleague which needs no introduction, Valdis Dombrovskis. I mean, obviously, Valdis, you represent the European Union. You have been front and center. You have been an amazing colleague at the G7. You always bring wisdom to the table, and certainly a lot of leadership that has helped us achieve a big agenda. I'm sure colleagues would like to hear from you today about the Ukrainian investment facility, which is going in that direction in terms of everything that the EU has done in order to facilitate business investment, de-risking, addressing, you know, sometimes what I call the first mile, the last mile in some of these projects to make them easier to achieve. So with that, Valdis, I just want to say on behalf of all the colleagues also here, but also at the G7, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the leadership of the EU. And thank you also for President von der Leyen and her words today, because, you know, you are at the center of the efforts and everyone is grateful for you. So Valdis, my friend, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, François-Philippe. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here to this year's Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome. And maybe allow me first with a couple of more general remarks. Obviously, it's important that we continue to provide all necessary financial and military support to Ukraine. So that's what we need to focus on as European Union, as our G7 partners, as European financial institutions. because we see that Russia's war against Ukraine continues relentlessly. So financing needs, unfortunately, are growing again, and we already had earlier meeting with the Finance Minister Marchenko to discuss, in a sense, how to cover those financing needs. It's worth noting that European Union is by far the largest international donor to Ukraine. So far, we have mobilized some 165 billion euros of support for Ukraine. Just today, we are disbursing another 1 billion euros under our macrofinancial assistance program, which is our contribution to the G7-era loans initiative. We must acknowledge the Italian G7 presidency leadership actually championing this and making sure that this G7-era loans initiative becomes a reality. And I'm glad that now all G7 partners are contributing and disbursing to this program, which is backed by the revenues from immobilized Russian assets. So in a sense, Russia is already paying for the damage it is creating in Ukraine. The question is obviously that when we are discussing about Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction, it's not only about the public funding which we can provide, but also indeed how do we mobilize private investment. And one of the first topics is the question of insurance, war insurance, but also more broadly insurance coverage in Ukraine, because clearly many businesses perceive investment in Ukraine right now as a risky one. So having insurance at reasonable terms that it still keeps those projects commercially viable is very important. And actually 2 years ago at the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London, EBRD was launching a pilot scheme exactly dealing with those war insurance issues, and there are other elements like this. And then indeed we are working a lot through our European financial institutions, because they are the ones which can leverage this public finance, our public guarantees which we are providing as European Union, to then provide funding to the private sector both in Ukraine and also to investors interested to invest in Ukraine. And there I would like to indeed commend both the EIB and EBRD for your very strong engagement and active role you are playing in supporting Ukraine and financing also private investment in Ukraine. And obviously in this recovery, reconstruction phase, that is what will be increasingly important.
Thank you very much, Valdis, for this was a good scene setter. Now we'll turn to the experts. We'll talk to the enablers. And I would say for those who want to take notes, that's the moment to pick up your pen and paper, because you're going to learn things that are going to be useful in order for the reconstruction. We as ministers have been trying to set the stage, but now you really have those who make it happen in the real world. And so you will hear from 4 different international financial institutions, and I'll ask the same question to the 4, because one thing would be interesting for those watching at home and those who might be less familiar, because we have more like 4,000 or 5,000 people thanks to the Italian presidency. We have a very successful conference. The respective mandates you have, it might be clear to me, might be clear to Sergei because he talks to you every day, but it might not be clear to 5,000 people about what are the respective mandates of your respective international financial institution. It'd be interesting if you would cover some of the de-risking tools that you have in your toolbox, because this is really about providing a toolbox to the private sector, the entrepreneur, the investors who want to invest in Ukraine. And also, I always think that success builds success. So if you were to share some success stories, I'm sure that would be great, because sometimes when I talk to CEOs, board members, they look at the opportunity, but few of them want to be the first necessarily. They like to see others and success stories. We heard yesterday, Sergei and I, we had 15 business leaders with us, and I can tell you when people talk about their success, it kind of generates additional interest, because people say, well, if they've done it, perhaps I can succeed as well. So let me start with President Calvino of the European Investment Bank. Obviously, you are a well-known figure to, I would say, everyone around this audience. You are a great leader. I've had the privilege of listening to you many times. So I am delighted that you would be taking time to be on this panel today, because every time you spoke, I can tell you, you always go to the point and people take note. So it's quite telling that we start with you, and then I will go to Madame la Présidente Renaud Basseau par la suite. But President Cavallino, I think we should start with you.
Well, thank you very much. The expectation bar is so high that, I mean, no pressure for us, I think, now. No, but I thought I would complement some of the points that have been made by previous speakers. And first, let me say, who is the European Investment Bank? Because you are right to say many people maybe don't know that the European Union created, when the European communities were created, they created this European Investment Bank. And with a capital injection from the shareholders, the member states, we have been able to mobilize trillions of investment to finance all the large infrastructures in the European Union, to move into riskier investments in Europe's innovators, and also to expand our activities in the rest of the world. So with the 600 billion balance sheet, I think we're the largest, or together with the World Bank Group, probably the largest multilateral financial institution. But 90% of the finance goes inside the European Union. And that explains why being present throughout the world in some regions, for example, in the neighborhood, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has a larger share to play, a larger role to play. And this will bring me to one of the 3 points I want to make. The first, what kind of enabling factors, what kind of activities and features are important to mobilize the necessary finance and the necessary investment by the private sector? And the first thing we need to do is to start the reconstruction while the war is going on. And we have discussed this a lot today. By rebuilding the infrastructures and building better, by protecting and building shelters for the schools, for the critical energy infrastructures, by diversifying the energy system, by repairing and building stronger, more resilient transport infrastructures, by recovering water supplies or transport, municipal transport throughout all the cities of Ukraine. We are already creating resilience during the war, but building a strong basis for the recovery. And that is why I always say I am extremely confident that the recovery is going to be very, very fast and very strong once the war is over. And we're walking the talk. Just today in the conference, we're signing agreements with the Ukrainian government for 600 million euros to finance critical infrastructures in energy and transport. We're signing 10 agreements with European export credit agencies to provide guarantees for EU companies exporting to Ukraine, and this is already building a backbone of relationship between the two economies. We have been signing agreements with Ukrainian banks to provide finance for SMEs throughout the country. So we're walking the talk, and we're doing it together. This is a very important point, working together. We're not competing. We see where are you more effective, where is the World Bank better placed, where is UN development program on the ground, so that we can really be as effective as possible working as a system. Very fast, the two other points I wanted to flag. The second point I want to flag is the expectation. So we know economics is about expectations. The accession to the European Union is the most powerful expectation for any country. Actually, it's no wonder that so many countries want to join, because the experience of the latest accession and enlargement in 2004 shows that by 2019, the GDP per capita of these countries had doubled, and the European Union's GDP had increased by 30%. This is really showing the power of enlargement. And so we need to make sure that we have a successful enlargement, and providing technical expertise and technical assistance is very important. And today we're launching, actually today, together with the EBRD and the European Commission, an Ukraine First program to provide the technical assistance to shape those projects, those bankable projects, to mobilize the private sector. And the third and final point, but I really want to mention it, it has to do with the previous speakers and the head of the OECD. Governance and institutions. Private investors will invest in Ukraine if they trust that there is legal certainty, that there is legal security, and that there is no corruption. And so it is of the utmost importance, and we discuss it every time we meet with Serhiy, that we also support the Ukrainian institutions to ensure that there is a business-favorable environment when it comes to the rule of law, trust, and a good financial management in the country, in the public and in the private sector.
Thank you very much. And I think you inspired all of us when you said build back better. If I listen to you, I mean, I heard that also from some of the people today. Serhiy, we have this great opportunity to do that with you. And you talk about two of the three pillars that I call that are fundamental for investment, stability, predictability, and the rule of law. And I think you were quite right, Madam President, to highlight these, because the reform agenda is very much there. The accession to the European Union is obviously appealing to investors, and we talked about that yesterday, and obviously everything else that you said, and thank you for clarifying the mandate. Now we'll go to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which Canada is a shareholder, so that's also, you have a big shareholder base. You also are part of the international institutions that are really making a difference. And since quite some time, I don't remember the exact date that the bank was created, but you've been at the heart of the reconstruction, and therefore it's only telling that we would go to you second to hear about, you know, some of the success stories, some of the de-risking. I know you provide also guarantees, because from an investor perspective, these guarantees, de-risking to a large extent. I mean, Valdis was talking also about our UK friends, which led the insurance or the reinsurance market to allow for these investments. But Madame Renaud-Bassot, c'est avec plaisir que je vous cède la parole. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Merci, merci. Maybe I will start by acknowledging, and it's something we've been doing in every Ukraine recovery conference, but the resilience of the country, the resilience of the people, the resilience of the ministers. I mean, I think that's something that we need. I mean, times pass, the situation remains very difficult, remains very challenging, and still the country keeps going, people keep growing and fighting, and I think that they cannot do that alone. So really continuing to support Ukraine is absolutely fundamental. Just because you ask what each bank or who are we, so EBRD has been created indeed at the collapse of the Soviet Union, 91, and with a view to develop market economies, these post-communist countries, and I mean, Ukraine was since the beginning one of our very important country of operation, and our mandate is very much to support the private sector, and we are, I mean, European bank, because of the geography, I mean, we work around the EU and in the neighborhood. We have a majority of European shareholders, but global institution with Canada, US, Japan, and overall more than 71 shareholders. So Ukraine, for us, it's since the beginning, at the creation of the bank, a very core in our mandate. And with the beginning of the war, since the beginning of the war, we really stepped up our financing. We deployed more than 7.2 billion. At the end of these 2 days, it will be 7.6 billion of finance deployed in Ukraine. So which means that we used to do 1 billion of investment a year before the war. We doubled down with the war, thanks to donor support, thanks to guarantees from the EU. And 86% of our projects are in the private sector. In volume, it's less. So in volume, it's 53% of our funding in the private sector and 47% in the public sector, because the size of the private sector projects are smaller. But in terms of number of projects, our focus is really private sector. And what we do in the public sector is very consistent with what Nadia mentioned, which is we need to keep the economy going. You need to have key infrastructure functioning. So 1/3 of our investment have been in the energy sector to help the countries and the state-owned companies like the network electricity company or the railway company or energy generation company in hydroelectricity to rebuild and to repair very quickly after when there were some destruction. And you know that the energy sector has been particularly targeted by Russia since 3 years. And so investing in this area is absolutely key to keep energy available for people to be able to stay in Ukraine and for business to be able to continue to function. So that's something where we remain very, very active, but also key infrastructure, so that's the railway. The railway in Ukraine is a key component of the life today for, business to be able to transport equipment, exports, and so forth. So that remains at the core of what we do, but with a strong focus on the private sector. And private sector is both direct financing, so we are available to finance foreign direct investment. Last year we had a big success with a French company investing in telecom, and we were able to provide them financing with IFC, together with IFC, for the biggest foreign direct investment in the country in the last few years. But we also work very much with the banks, through the banks, in order to be able to support also SMEs, which are extremely, the backbone of the economy. So continuing to finance SMEs, their investment, their working capital needs, and so forth, is also extremely important. The second point I wanted to make is that financing is key, but policy work is also very important. And we have put in place, before the war, but we have stepped it up in the war, what we call Ukraine reform architecture, whereby we finance more than 300 experts in the Ukrainian government in order to support the reform agenda, project preparation, the EU accession, reform agenda, and so forth. So it's really to step up the capacity of the Ukrainian government and bringing in experts that will help accelerate what is needed what needs to be done. In terms of reform from our side, we put a lot of effort on SOE reforms, SOEs are very important in the Ukrainian economy, be it on the banking sector, but also energy sector, and so forth. So ensuring that the governance is fit for purpose, transparency, implementation of rule of law, and so forth. This is extremely important. But we'll start also thinking about reforms that will be very important for the reconstruction, full-fledged reconstruction when the war is over. And for example, working on the capital market structure, how to better have a capital market better fit for purpose in order to be able to attract private investors and for businesses to raise investment in the local capital market and grow in the context of the reconstruction. So that will be very important. Third point is that I think the situation, the war, this prolonged war, has put each institution on, pushed us to our boundaries and obliged us to innovate. And Valdis was mentioning before the facility we put in place together with private reinsurers and local insurers in order to be able to guarantee, to kickstart again the local market insurers for transportation of goods and in the country. The market was completely off. With donor support, the EU and other bilateral donors, we are able to guarantee reinsurers that provide some reinsurance for local market, local insurers, and then able to start again providing some guarantees, which is very important for business, for export, and so forth. So we did that. We are working on a new mechanism for attracting private investors in the energy renewable sector. whereby, because it's very important to be able to guarantee some prices or give at least some security in terms of return on investment, and we just signed a letter of intent with the Commission in order to start implementing and developing such a framework that will facilitate foreign investment, private sector investment in the renewable sector that will be so important. So this is demanding. Sometimes it takes time to develop this type of product, but I think it's absolutely warranted if we want to address what are the real needs and to cover and to enable private investment to come back. To conclude, I think looking forward, I see 3 key success factors. The first one is supporting human capital. We see human capital now as one of the big challenges, and being able to help reintegration of veterans, to help business to adjust to the human capital tight situation is absolutely key. We will have tomorrow a charter with the Ukrainian Minister of Economy for human capital to give some principles and useful for the business in order to be able to deal with this situation, which is quite unique. The second thing is working together, and I think that the panel and all the work we do together on the ground between the different IFIs is absolutely fundamental, and with the Ukrainian government, I think this is key to have a single pipeline of projects and to complement each other and build upon each other's strengths. And the last one is continuing to provide donor support. We use as much as we can our balance sheet, but leverage has some limitations. You need some counterparties need some grant, very concessional funding and so forth. So it's a call for all countries participating to this conference to continue to be mobilized for Ukraine. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci. Thank you, mentioning people first, and thank you for a very broad overview of everything you've been doing. And I've heard your last message, I thought was directed at us, some of the shareholders, and I was looking around. And thank you for your great leadership. Governatore, andiamo a lei adesso. Governatore Monticelli, che ci parla.
Okay, Governor Monticelli, can you please tell us about your bank?
In the known, your mandate is very well known, but I would think that for those watching at home today and those in the audience who represent the private sector, one thing that I think I like, not as a minister, but just as someone who's interested in the reconstruction, is the collaborative spirit that I hear from all of you. You know, that each institution is working alongside the other so that we can do more together. It might be good if I go back to the initial question to look at your mandate perhaps more specifically so that people understand where's the Council of Europe come into that before we go to the World Bank Group, which is also very well known to people, and then look at some of the example and success story that you've been promoting. And thank you again for hosting us here in Italy. We're all delighted. Governatore, a lei.
Well, thank you so much for your nice words. I wish to thank the Italian authorities for having convened these important meetings and to have organized under your guidance this very important panel. And I mean, you have raised the expectation a lot, putting on us a lot of pressure, but it's fair. We are there to deliver. And before turning to the SEB, I just want to stress again the point that you yourself made, but also the other colleagues, how closely we are working together, sharing information, co-financing, and so the collaborative effort has been really one of the distinctive features of our operation in Ukraine. And by the way, this is an effort that, if you will, we are in the process now of extending in our way of working. We are taking very seriously the notion that we should work as a system. This year the SEB happens to be the chair of the group of heads of MDBs, and we are really doing a lot of concrete actions to be more collaborative, more effective. I won't go into the details, but they extend from having mutual reliance agreements to implementing better ways to use our capital endowment. But of course, these efforts this joint effort can only be really effective and impactful if there is a close collaboration with the authorities. And this is something that has already come up in the intervention of my colleagues, but I really must stress again, because the good collaboration with the Ukrainian authorities has been really essential for all of us to deliver, for the SEB in particular, since contrary to the other four institutions that are sitting in this panel, we only started to operate in Ukraine in 2023, because this is when Ukraine became a member of ours, and so it was really very important to count on the help of the more experience, and also to establish this good collaboration with the Ukrainian government to deliver on the ground. Now, what is the SEB? The SEB, leaving aside the World Bank, is the oldest multilateral development bank in the world, established in 1956 to take care of refugees from the Second World War. And it has a very distinct feature in terms of mandate, because it focuses only on social investment. Schools, hospital, social housing, and this was at the beginning, and the bank has always stuck to this mission, and indeed this is the contribution that we are bringing to the group. Now, when the aggression started, Ukraine was not yet a member, but yet we wanted to help, and we did by supporting countries that were just hosting people fleeing from the war. Then very rapidly we went together for Ukraine to become a member. They did in 2023. And since then, we have already approved 6 projects for over half a billion. Nearly 200 million have already been disbursed. So it has really been a success story in delivering impact. And now going to your point, business is attracted by success stories. We, given our nature and mandate, mostly operate with the public sector. We do supply essential social services, and our success is in delivering impact, and our contribution to the private sector, job creation and development is creating the human capital, helping to have the human capital, which is an enabling factor for the private sector to thrive. Looking forward, clearly the message is to continue to work together. And turning now to the issue of shareholder support, it is clearly an issue about having more resources to be able to put the risk on our balance sheet, but at the same time, we need grants to help with the work of capacity building that is necessary for our project to be impactful. And indeed, I just want to acknowledge the European Union as a great partner with us, but with all of us in providing resources to this end.
Grazie mille, Governatore. So we have about 10 minutes left, so it's good that we turn to the World Bank. And colleagues, I'm sure you will want to hear from Valdis from the European Union, and the last word will be for Sergei, because actually we're here for you. So it's only fair that we leave you the last word. But first, the World Bank Group, I mean, certainly everyone knows you. And people are clear that you've been doing great work. You've been very, very engaged. And I want to say thank you on behalf of all of us, because you're a very trusted entity in which we've been working very closely. So I'll pass the word to the Managing Director, Björde, and I want to say thank you again for your leadership. I heard you this morning, and I'm sure colleagues will be very delighted to hear from you this afternoon. What you've been doing, some of the de-risking, some of the guarantees, and the leadership of the World Bank in the reconstruction efforts.
Well, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be on the panel representing the World Bank Group and to respond to your question of what really is the mandate of each and every one of us. Not everybody knows that the World Bank's official name is actually the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and that is because we were created in 1944, and the focus really was on reconstruction, and the development part came at the request of our clients actually in Latin America, who said we have not suffered the pain and the damage and destruction that other countries have, particularly Europe, but we need development. So could you please add the D to the International Bank for Reconstruction? So we became the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. That was in 1944. To that then came an addition of IDA, which is our fund for the poorest. And I would like to actually give a shout out to our Italian host here, because in our recent replenishment, Italy increased significantly its contribution to IDA, and we're so very grateful to that, along with other donors who have stepped up. It's one of the most effective concessional funds for the poorest countries in the world. To that came the International Finance Corporation, which focuses on the private sector, invests with private companies around the world for development. And to that came MIGA, which focuses on political risk insurance. And to that also came a less known but incredibly important entity, the fifth part of the World Bank Group, which is ICSID, which is our center for settling disputes between private companies and governments. So we consider ourselves a bit of a one-stop shop, working in close unison with everybody here on the panel. But I must also reflect on the importance of these recovery conferences. I've been attending them annually, and each and every one has one thing in common, and that is that we must help Ukraine through this difficult time, but we must also focus on planning for tomorrow. And that's why I love what the speakers before me have talked about, which is really both today and tomorrow. Project preparation, pipeline, reforms, financing, leveraging, innovation, all of that is so very important. I want to focus on a few numbers and then maybe share with you some of the thinking we're doing together with Ukraine on the economy of the future. Some of the numbers, you mentioned it, $524 billion. That is our estimate alongside with the EU and the UN for the damage and needs assessment we released in February. That is the damage and needs assessment over a 10-year period. It's a huge amount of money. We anticipate that at least 1/3 should be able to be mobilized by the private sector. So that emphasizes the importance of the public and the private. Another important number I like to emphasize, and it talks a little bit about how the World Bank Group works, it's $81 billion. What is $81 billion? It's the amount of money that we have mobilized for Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Much of it has come from Ukraine's key development partners through the World Bank, because we set up a platform that was seen as conducive to channel funds for priority repair, recovery, reconstruction, and to meet essential needs through the Ministry of Finance for Ukrainians, 57 billion of which has been dispersed. But the most important part really is, and you emphasized it, behind these numbers are real people. Behind these numbers are real people. And it's about families needing homes, it's about children needing schools, it's about communities needing access to healthcare, energy, and all other critical services. And this is really what our support has focused on. But we also know, as we mentioned, that public resources won't be enough. We need to really, really focus on mobilizing the private sector. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenge that the government of Ukraine posed to us, which is, what does the economy of the future of Ukraine look like? So we're working on this together, of course, with partners, and the North Star for Ukraine is EU accession, as it should be. Ukraine belongs in Europe, has a lot of value to add to Europe, and can also benefit a lot from Europe. But we have identified something we call the fours: 4 opportunities, 4 challenges, and 4 reforms. And I want to briefly just talk about each. On the opportunity side, of course, is the integration from the European Union, which opens up markets and anchors reforms. The second one is very much around emerging sectors and skills, including information technology, which we have seen so much now during this war period, including in defense technologies, which we believe can be hugely leveraged for the new economy. The third is reconstruction can attract substantial investments and also revitalize local economies. And the fourth, around the opportunities, comes from the support of the international community and also a very vibrant civil society in Ukraine. But there are challenges to overcome, and let me mention 4. The first one is the destruction of capital and the acute labor shortages that constrain growth. The second one is, of course, that the war has led to pretty significant macro imbalances, particularly significant fiscal deficits, and this is, of course, what Ministry of Finance deals with each and every day. The third one is that we have seen a very large increase in poverty. Ukraine did not have much poverty before the war, particularly extreme poverty. Now we consider that Ukraine actually has a huge and significant poverty challenge to address. And the fourth one is that we need to move away from Ukraine's old and undynamic economic model of a large shadow economy and a large and heavy state footprint, and that includes the SOEs. At pre-war growth rates, it would take Ukraine around 37 years to converge to 25% of the average EU GDP per capita, and that is obviously way too long for the Ukrainian people. So what would it take for a private sector-led economy to recover? And this is where I want to talk about the 4 reforms that we see as pivotal as part of the fours. First and foremost is reforms to strengthen the foundations for growth. And here we see the importance of a well-designed fiscal adjustment that can support reconstruction spending without hindering growth. And this means, for example, to reform the tax regime that currently keeps firms small and informal, and that involves strengthening governance, especially anti-corruption, which remains central. We also see reforms critical to rebuild infrastructure. Here, key to this is to create markets. For example, the housing market, which is a huge area of needs. We expect that out of the 524 billion in needs that I mentioned, about 80 billion is for housing alone, and about 13% of the housing stock in Ukraine because of the war has been destroyed. The third area of reforms is about improving business dynamism and productivity, and that has to do with increasing access to domestic finance, mobilizing FDI, enabling privatization, liberalizing markets, and increasing competition. And finally, comprehensive reforms of labor regulations, social protection, and pension systems to help to incentivize more people into the labor market while strengthening the social cohesion. This sounds like a lot, But we also know that these reforms are necessary to accelerate the growth and the job creation. Finally, as I mentioned this morning when we met with the multi-donor platform that's been created, Ukraine is not alone in doing this. As you have heard from every speaker, we are with Ukraine each step of the way, and international support and partnership will continue to be essential, both to increase and attract the investments needed, to help front-load financing so those fiscal deficits that Ukraine is facing can be filled, and technical assistance to be able to provide the design work that needs to be done now to prepare for tomorrow. I want to close by just expressing the World Bank Group's unwavering commitment to stand with Ukraine today and tomorrow, and we look forward to working in unison with all of the partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much for really outlining the reform, the challenges, and the opportunities that you see at the World Bank. Valdis, I know you're capable of a lot, but now I have a real test for you. In 1 minute, and I'll give our friend Sergei 2 minutes in order to try to keep the timetable that the Italian presidency has asked me to keep. In 1 minute, give us your final thoughts after everything you've heard from the panelists and Sergei today to inspire the people who are with us this evening to reconstruct Europe and Ukraine.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for engagement and our international and European financial institutions for very strong work, G7 partners for all the work and support you are providing. We just heard from the World Bank's latest figure on damage assessment in Ukraine, and we see that this is immense. And this will require very significant mobilization of both like-minded international partners, of international financial institutions. Importantly, we should not forget that also Russia has to pay for the damage it is creating in Ukraine, because it's Russia which is causing this all. So it's important to stick with the G7 principle, which we agreed and reiterated recently also in our G7 finance ministers meeting in Bav, that Russia's assets should stay immobilized as long Russia has not paid reparations to Ukraine for the damages created. So it's important really to stick with this principle. And a final point, I would like to comment, indeed, reforms were mentioned, Ukraine's reform commitment and reform momentum. Despite extremely difficult situation, Ukraine government is moving forward also with reforms linked to our macro financial assistance program, linked to Ukraine facility, but most importantly linked to the Ukraine's EU accession process. So it's important that we continue to do our work to provide all necessary support. Ukraine continues to do its work, defending itself, doing necessary reforms, and to ensure that Ukraine's future is in the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Valdis. Thank you very much. Sergei, you heard from your best friends today. Those are your best friends. Look on your right and your left. Those are your best friends. Feedback, comments, ask, as we have not only your best friends here in the room, but the people who really want to play a pivotal role. Like I said, there's a moral imperative, but also a generational opportunity. And it's not all on your shoulder, because you've heard that everyone here is willing to stand side by side to build a better Ukraine. And therefore, I'll give you 2 minutes to conclude, and then we'll just thank everyone in the room for being with us today. Sergei.
Thank you, Francois-Philippe. Now, I personally feel better than it was at the beginning of war. Definitely, I feel support of our Kyiv friends and colleagues, and I'm really grateful for all joint efforts you've done together during this it's the 4th years of wars, very hard years, but what we really believe that with joint efforts we can resolve any issues which we have. And if you're talking about resilience and resolution of these people, it's very tremendous, and I would like to raise these expectations even higher. I remember quite well, at that time I didn't work with the government, but I remember at that time as a huge crisis, 2028, 2010, starting from a mortgage crisis, and it was crisis of Greek debt. It was tremendous problems for financial system. And you know, at that time, people and specifically finance ministries and all people which collectively decided to resolve this issue, they were so scared, but then they so determined to resolve it once and for all. So now we haven't seen any problems with in financial markets. And I think that Ukraine's war with Russia, it's another example of crisis. And it's not only military command should gather together and figure out what we should do to resolve this problem, but it also should be people with financial backgrounds, which collectively can and proactively can prepare a necessary solution for Ukraine, which not just drop by drop help us to survive. And we're grateful for this particular alliance of support as a patient. You know, we are very calm patient. We receiving these lines and we're very happy to be receiving this. But if we want to really resolve the problem, resolve this war, we should think about brave actions, how to make Russia pay. I mean, pay not only right now, but in future. So we are talking about frozen Russian assets. We are talking about additional sanctions on Russia, oil and gas. We're talking about additional sanctions on Russia, other commodities. Secondary sanctions. It's responsibilities of ministries of finance. It's not responsibilities of military command. So I urge all of us, let's make this step forward and be brave enough and to punish Russia economy for them to really understand what does it mean to fight with ministries of finance. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, so let's seize the moment, let's be ambitious, and let's rebuild Ukraine together. Big round of applause to the distinguished panel. Thank you for all you in the audience. Have a very nice evening. Grazie mille a tutti. Buona serata. Grazie.